Disclaimer. This book may contain content that is considered historically inaccurate or culturally insensitive by modern standards. My hope is that by exploring old literature, we will better understand why people of the past thought the way that they did and understand the influences that shape their culture. This video is not intended for young audiences. Hi, I'm Morgan, and today I will be reading to you from Out of Door Book, which is the 7th book in a series or collection of books called The Children's Hour, published by Houghton Mifflin Co. in 1907. And the story I will be reading is The Busy Blue Jay by Olive Thorne Miller. And here is a beautiful illustration of what appears to be a blue jay, and I will read the text below it. Jakey had decided opinions about people who came into the room to see me or to see the birds. At some persons he would squawk every moment. Others he saluted with a queer cry like, "Oble, oble, oble." Once when a lady came in with a baby, he fixed his eyes on that infant with a savage look, as if he would like to peck it, and jumped back and forth in his cage, panting, but perfectly silent. Jakey was very devoted to me. He always greeted me with a low, sweet chatter, with wings quivering. Here's the illustration again. Now I will start on the text. One of the most interesting birds who ever lived in my bird room was a blue jay named Jakey. He was full of business from morning till night, scarcely ever a moment still. Poor little fellow! He had been stolen from the nest before he could fly, and reared in a house, long before he was given to me. Of course he could not be set free, for he did not know how to take care of himself. Jays are very active birds, and being shut up in a room, my blue jay had to find things to do, to keep himself busy. If he had been allowed to grow up out of doors, he would have found plenty to do, planting acorns and nuts, nesting, and bringing up families. Sometimes the things he did in the house were what we call mischief, because they annoy us, such as hammering the woodwork to pieces, tearing bits out of the leaves of books, working holes in chair seats, or pounding a cardboard box to pieces. But how is a poor little bird to know what is mischief? Many things which Jakey did were very funny. For instance, he made it his business to clear up the room. When he had more food than he could eat at the moment, he did not leave it around, but put it away carefully. Not in the garbage pail, for that was not in the room, but in some safe nook where it did not offend the eye. Sometimes it was behind the tray in his cage, or among the books on the shelf. The places he liked best were about me, in the fold of a ruffle or the loop of a bow on my dress, and sometimes in the side of my slipper. The very choicest place of all was in my loosely bound hair. That, of course, I could not allow, and I had to keep very close watch of him for fear I might have a bit of bread or meat thrust among my locks. In his clearing up, he always went carefully over the floor, picking up pins or any little things he could find, and I often dropped burnt matches, buttons, and other small things to give him something to do. These he would pick up and put nicely away. Pins Jakey took lengthwise in his beak, and at first I thought he had swallowed them, till I saw him hunt up a proper place to hide them. The place he chose was between the leaves of a book. He would push a pin far in out of sight, and then go after another. A match he always tried to put in a crack under the baseboard, between the breadths of matting, or under my rockers. He first placed it, and then tried to hammer it in out of sight. He could seldom get it in far enough to suit him, and this worried him. Then he would take it out and try another place. Once the blue jay found a good match, of the parlor match variety. He put it between the breadths of matting, and then began to pound on it, as usual. Pretty soon he hit the unburnt end, and it went off with a loud crack, as parlor matches do. Poor Jakey jumped 2 feet into the air, nearly frightened out of his wits, and I was frightened too, for I feared he might set the house on fire. Often when I got up from my chair, a shower of the bird's playthings would fall from his various hiding places about my dress, nails, matches, shoe buttons, breadcrumbs, and other things. Then he had to begin his work all over again. Jakey liked a small ball or a marble. His game was to give it a hard peck and see it roll. If it rolled away from him, he ran after it and pecked again, but sometimes it rolled towards him, and then he bounded into the air as if he thought it would bite. And what was funny, he was always offended at this conduct of the ball, and went off sulky for a while. He was a timid little fellow. Wind or storm outside, the windows made him wild. He would fly around the room, squawking at the top of his voice, and the horrible tin horns the boys liked to blow at Thanksgiving and Christmas drove him frantic. Once I brought a Christmas tree into the room to please the birds, and all were delighted with it except my poor little blue jay, who was much afraid of it. Think of the sadness of a bird being afraid of a tree! And then there is a section break, and it says, Jakey had decided opinions about people who came into the room to see me, or to see the birds. At some persons he would squawk every moment. Others he saluted with a queer cry like, "Blah-blah, oh blah-blah, oh blah-blah." Once when a lady came in with a baby, he fixed his eyes on that infant with a savage look, as if he would like to peck it, and jumped back and forth in his cage, panting, but perfectly silent. Jakey was very devoted to me. He always greeted me with a low, sweet chatter, with wings quivering, and if he were out of the cage, he would come on the back of my chair and touch my cheek or lips very gently with his beak, or offer me a bit of food if he had any, and to me alone, when no one else was near, he sang a low, exquisite song. I afterwards heard a similar song, sung by a wild blue jay to his mate while she was sitting, and so I knew that my dear little captive had given me his sweetest, his love song. One of Jakey's amusements was dancing across the back of a tall chair, taking funny little steps, coming down hard, jouncing his body, and whistling as loud as he could. He would keep up this funny performance as long as anybody would stand before him and pretend to dance too. My Jay was fond of a sensation. One of his dearest bits of fun was to drive the birds into a panic. This he did by flying furiously around the room, feathers rustling, and squawking as loud as he could. He usually managed to fly just over the head of each bird, and as he came like a catapult, everyone flew before him, so that in a minute the room was full of birds flying madly about, trying to get out of his way. This gave him great pleasure. Wild blue jays, too, liked to stir up their neighbors. A friend told me of a small party of blue jays that she saw playing this kind of joke on a flock of birds of several kinds. Robins, catbirds, thrashers, and others. These birds were gathering the cherries on the top branches of a big cherry tree. The jays sat quietly on another tree till the cherry eaters were very busy eating. Then suddenly the mischievous blue rogues would all rise together and fly at them, as my pet did at the birds in the room. It had the same effect on the wild birds. They all flew in a panic. Then the joking jays would return to their tree and wait till their victims forgot their fear and came straggling back to the cherries, when they repeated the fun. Once a grasshopper got into the bird room, probably brought in clinging to someone's dress, in the way grasshoppers do. Jakey was in his cage, but he noticed the stranger instantly, and I opened the door for him. He went at once to look at the grasshopper, and when it hopped, he was so startled that he hopped too. Then he picked the insect up, but he did not know what to do with it, so he dropped it again. Again the grasshopper jumped directly up, and again the jay did the same. This they did over and over, till everyone was tired laughing at them. It looked as if they were trying to see who could jump the highest. There was another bird in the room, however, who knew what grasshoppers were good for. He was an orchard oriole, and after looking on a while, he came down and carried off the hopper to eat. The jay did not like to lose his plaything. He ran after the thief, and stood on the floor giving low cries, and looking on while the oriole on a chair was eating the dead grasshopper. When the oriole happened to drop it, Jakey, who had got a new idea what to do with grasshoppers, snatched it up and carried it under a chair and finished it. I could tell many more stories about my bird, but I have told them before in one of my grown-up books, so I will not repeat them here. And that is the end of The Busy Blue Jay by Olive Thorne Miller. And if you wanted to see the illustration again, here it is. Thank you for listening to this story with me, and I hope that you have a great day. Bye!